success doesn't cause happiness. Happiness causes success.
Beautiful.
If you could be yourself and you could focus on gratitude of what you're able to accomplish, you're going to become happy. If you're going to become happy, you can become unstoppable. Everything is in your reach.
In this episode, you'll get to know Meny Hoffman, the creative brandpreneur, and you'll hear the story of how he stayed humble and learned from failure to become a respected business leader in the Jewish community. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Show. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show. This is where I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my life's journey so that I can teach my kids how to be successful, but you get to come along for the ride and learn along with them. If you're not familiar with who I am, I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've taught millions of people how to be successful through my online courses, in particular, my courses on LinkedIn Learning. With this show, I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to create a legacy project to help my family and help anyone learn how to succeed by looking for universal principles of success. I try to interview people who have multi-faceted success in many areas of their life, not just financial, not just career. And my guest today is one of those people. He's someone that's remarkable. First, I met him when he invited me to speak at an event he was putting on, and we've just sort of cultivated a friendship through the years. Even though I'm in Salt Lake and he's in New York, we've managed to stay in contact with each other. But before we get into that, I just want to encourage you to do one thing. As you listen to today's episode, look for something you can do. Look for an action you can take today or this week to make my guest's success story a part of your success story. Meny Hoffman is the CEO of PTEX Group, an award-winning branding and marketing agency headquartered in Brooklyn, New York. Meny is a lifelong entrepreneur who's passionate about creating winning strategies that help growing businesses flourish. He's been successfully helping brands grow and thrive since 2001. He's the host of the Let's Talk Business podcast, a show that provides entrepreneurs with powerful tools needed to learn, grow, and lead. Meny is also a popular speaker who shares his strategies at regional corporations and conferences, and he's a proud husband and father of 8 children. Meny, it's wonderful to see your face and connect with you again. We've spent some time together. First, you had me come to your LTB event, it's still one of my favorite events I've ever spoken to. For those who aren't familiar, just tell people a little bit about what that was.
Sure. So we have a platform called Let's Talk Business, and that's a platform where people come together to talk business because every great relationship starts with a conversation. And we used to do those events on a regular basis. And one of those summits, you were a guest speaker. You spoke about productivity, which is a very important topic for leaders.
And your audience primarily are Jewish business leaders. Is that accurate?
Yes. So obviously it's close to home, and it's also an audience that I felt I could bring in a lot of information that maybe they weren't exposed to on a regular basis.
And then we also reconnected in Brooklyn several years ago. And you were so generous. You showed me around your office, the wonderful people that you work with. And then you took me to, honestly, one of the best dinners I've ever had in my life. What was that restaurant that you took me to in Brooklyn?
I think it was The Loft, a phenomenal restaurant run by one of my friends. Kosher food is always good. That kosher food never disappoints.
Well, I think that's what it was. It was an amazing steakhouse, and it redefined what kosher food meant to me. Yeah. So thank you so much for that.
Sure.
So yeah, I've been excited to talk to you for quite a while. And what I like to do, Meny, when we do this, we're going to kind of go through your career journey chronologically with it. So I always like to ask this question at the beginning. It's the question that every kid gets asked, which is, when you were young, and let's talk about in your teenage years. In your teenage years, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I started growing up, I was the kid with the lemonade stand. Not necessarily I had a lemonade stand, but just understanding, I was trying to see whatever I was able to create stuff, I would be the person creating. So at one point it would be before a holiday, creating a coloring book and then selling it to my neighbors for $0.25 a piece and stuff like that. And believe it or not, my first business card I created when I was 13 years old. That was my passion. My passion was creating stuff. And I could say that I had a thrill of creating something that's maybe everlasting or has an impact, it does something. It's not just a one-off, done, lost a couple of hours and had some fun and moved on. And my first business card, and I remember 2 years later, I said, I have to upgrade. The business card is not up to par with what I'm doing. And I upgraded. So I have 3 versions of business cards that I've created before I had a business.
Where did that inspiration to be entrepreneurial come from? Was there a family member? Was there someone that you saw that inspired you in the neighborhood? Where did that come from?
My father always had a business, and he was into manufacturing. So I remember going with him sometimes on the weekends, opening the factory, and 100 people came in and started sewing hats and knits and scarves. And I used to sell to the Kmart, JCPenney's. And I wouldn't say that I grew up in an entrepreneurial family that they were very hungry for new ventures and stuff like that. I think a lot of it came from my own curiosity. I think if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, it could come from 2 places. It could come from a place where they saw family members being very aggressive, or you could have people that were just very curious. And I was very curious in the entrepreneurial journey. I was very curious of what it takes to build a good company. And throughout my life, I could point back to a lot of those moments of curiosity that moved me into a next venture or an expansion in the venture, or just even expansion in my knowledge.
Typically, when someone is young and they start businesses, like you're saying at the age of 13, you're in your teens, they don't go as planned. They don't quite work out. Did you have a business that you were excited about but failed early on?
So funny fact is that PTEX was my first venture. We used to be called PrintEX because we started off on the printing side of things before we started going into more the branding and marketing. But I wouldn't say that I had a venture that failed. I had definitely a bunch of components in my journey that failed, or thinking that let me go that route and then all of a sudden it failed. Let me go that route from leadership and it failed. But I did have a lot of, we call it revenue streams in this business throughout the years. We're now 23 and a half years old, so our company. So there's many, many different failures. And I like to call them out, and I appreciate you mentioned failures because we're living in a culture that a lot of people try to change it to learning experiences, which is good in concept, but it's not good in verbiage. Because people need to know that it failed and it's okay, versus using it, yes, after it failed, use the learning moment in order to see what you could do different next time. So I appreciate phrasing it in the way of a failure. But I do want to mention something which is also very important, and it's something that's very passionate to myself, and I've shared this very, very many times with entrepreneurs, which is you have to differentiate between a venture failing and you as a failure. A lot of entrepreneurs, the second their venture fails, they see themselves as a failure, and that's where their whole potential goes. You need to be able to separate a venture that failed from a human element and you as a failure, and you have to be able to say, what did I learn from that? And then I'm not a failure. My venture failed. How could I revive something? What could I do differently in the next time around?
That's so important. It really is, because one of the useful principles, in fact, I have it up on my wall. I have a little thing that says, I am just a scientist experimenting. I should not be surprised when my experiments fail, just pleasantly surprised when they succeed.
Beautiful.
Now, a real scientist will say, well, experiments actually never fail. But the point is, right, that we are experimenting. We're trying things out, and sometimes it doesn't work. And that's okay. We learn from it. We had a hypothesis. That's probably the better word. We had a hypothesis. We tested it. It doesn't work. What did we learn for it? And now we do it again. And I think having that sort of detached approach to business is very useful and keeps us with a healthy perspective.
I'll just add a couple of points on that because I think it's such an important point for entrepreneurs to learn is 2 things. One is that what ends up happening is if you could think this way, the way that we just discussed, it sometimes allows you to pause or let go of a venture that's failing because you're not emotional. You could disconnect emotionally. If that venture is failing and that means you are failing, you'll do whatever it takes. Think about you're swimming in the ocean and you need to get to the other side. You'll do whatever it takes to get to the other side of the ocean. But sometimes the best thing you could do is let go of that venture. So you need to have that mindset to be able to separate the two in order to make proper decisions. On the flip side, I want to add just one more point, which is let's not confuse a venture that failed because you were reckless versus a failure that happened because you did everything right. It just wasn't meant to be. It's just the market is not there 100% or stuff like that. And we need to be a little bit more specific to say entrepreneurship is not recklessness. There is a distance of somebody that's reckless versus somebody saying, I'm using this as an excuse. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to be reckless. I'm allowed to take somebody else's money and build a venture, which I didn't know only had 50% chance of succeeding in the first place. But if you have done the basic research and you've done the basic fundamentals of the business and it ends up not bringing in the money that you expected or the market is not going where you want it to go, the venture failed. Now, what could you learn from it? And maybe the second time around, you're going to be able to make it big.
No matter what your career is, your foundation of success begins with one thing: effective time management. And thanks to the generosity of Microsoft, you can get my entire course, Time Management Fundamentals, for free on LinkedIn Learning. Go to davegift.com to get your free access now. This is the course that millions around the world have used to become more productive and reduce stress. Everyone from Fortune 500 executives to freelancers to students. Now, it's the same coaching I've provided in person for tens of thousands of dollars per day, but you can get it for free on LinkedIn Learning. You don't need to provide anything to access it. No credit card, no email. Just go to davegift.com and start learning. Thank you so much, Microsoft and LinkedIn Learning, for your partnership. davegift.com. Early on, did you have a moment where you were reckless, or did you see someone else be reckless where you learned this lesson?
I would say that I was pretty naive when I started my business in terms of understanding just even the legalities of business. I hired my first employee. I didn't know there's something called as workers' comp. I remember it was my thrill of my life when I was able to offer a job for a family member. Hey, you're going to be my first employee. You're going to work a couple of hours a week. And I proudly wrote those payroll checks and then found out when my accountant told me at the end of the year, wait a minute, you don't have workers' comp. What's going on over here? You're writing payroll checks. And I made workers' comp only to get slapped with the $16,500 fine for all these days that I didn't have. That was a learning moment that I learned. And then I started growing my company and I wasn't equipped on the leadership skills. People think because you're an entrepreneur, you start a business, you're automatically a leader. You're not. It's a different mindset. I remember those days when I went out and seeked out help to understand now I have 5 team members. I have to lead them. They're expecting, and I have to know when to delegate, and I have to know when to start giving people autonomy and step back. And that was a huge pivotal moment in my career where I started seeing, okay, I need to shape up. I need to learn those trades in that process.
How long did it take you to learn that you needed to gain those skills?
So I think I was blessed that my curiosity kicked in pretty early. So before I saw a huge fallout happening from my lack of leadership skills, I remember going to an event. It was the first time I went to a 3-day event where I wanted to learn leadership. And at that event, it was day number 2 at the end of the day. And they went around the room asking everybody for like the aha moment. And when it came to me and I said, coming in, I was all frustrated. My team at fault on everything that's going wrong. Walking out today, I'm totally at blame of everything that's happening in my company. And I remember the moderator asking me, like, Meny, why are you so harsh on yourself? I said, because what I learned the last 2 days is that if my people have the skills and I'm just not giving it to them or not telling them what to do, it's my fault. If my people are not ready for the job, why are they in your boat? Why are they in their bus? Just let them go. So everything starts and stops by the leader. So that pivotal moment in my career said, all I'm going to do the next couple of years is focus on what a leader needs to focus on, which is strategy. There is a distance of working on the business versus in the business. And as soon as I started doing that, I started saying, okay, I have to work on the business. What does it really mean? And I started looking at my plate at 80-20. Like beginning, it was 80% in the business, 20% on the business. And then I said, I want to get to a level where 80% is on the business and 20% is in the business. And I could say 20 years later, that's where my focus is. 20% in the business, 80% on the business.
I just want to call something out here,
Sure,
Meny, and give you a compliment with this. So I have a course about how to be coachable on LinkedIn Learning. And one of the things that I talk about is we have to have both humility and confidence. The two are not mutually exclusive, and you are a good example of that. The humility is that you recognize the need to change. And in that story, I'm hearing someone who recognized, wait, I need to get better. But the confidence side of it is the confidence that I can get better, the confidence that I can improve, I can learn the skills, I can go to the training, and then I will get better. And that's a powerful combination that I think many people don't grasp. And so I appreciate you illustrating that for us.
Thank you for that. There's a quote from Dave Ramsey, which is, a business will never outgrow its leader. If you don't work on your own personal development, how could you actually be at a stage where the company needs to be? And I always tell it my team. So we're in the branding and marketing agency. So which means is we help businesses create their next in their brand journey. And I always tell my team, if you're not working on your own personal development, how can you help grow other people's businesses? So if you have that mindset of where they could achieve, what they could achieve, you got to start with yourself first.
You are a student. You are continually learning. And that's something that I've seen about you. And we're hearing that in your story. I want to step aside from the business for just a moment and talk about family, because I know family is very important to you. You have a large family. So I'm assuming you started your family fairly young. Is that accurate?
Yep. I was 20 and a half when I got married.
And so you were already running the business.
So I wasn't running the business itself. Like when I said before, I had my business cards when I was young. It wasn't like an official business. It was more like a hobby. So I wasn't running a business.
What were you doing for work prior to that?
I was in school.
So you went right from school into entrepreneurship.
Correct.
How did that work in the beginning? Did it work well, that balancing of your marriage with the business? Or what didn't work well and what did you need to improve with that balance?
So there's 4 pillars in your life. Everybody has their structure. The way I teach it and the way I have been able to share it with hundreds of people is, it's like a car. You have 4 tires. Nobody could use one tire and say, you know what, I'm going to only take care of one of my tires. No, it's ultimately you're going to crash. So the 4 tires of life, we have the spiritual side, we have the family side, we have the health, and we have the financials. And early on, I decided that in order to be a healthy entrepreneur, you shouldn't burn out and you should be able to be passionate and have your moments in life. You have to have your focus on all those 4 pillars of life. So that's how we started.
Typically, there are milestones that businesses reach where it starts to mature. So in the beginning, there's a business that's highly dependent on the entrepreneur. In fact, that maybe there's no employee. Then you get one employee and it starts to grow. Then we get into like the area of 5 to 10 employees where there's much more delegation occurring. How did you get to that point where you had 5 or 10 employees and start to let go of things as the leader?
So we opened this company I have a partner, and we had a conversation about bringing in a new employee. And then I said, what part of the process do I really like? Is it the art part of it? Is it the creative part of it? And then I said, no, what I really like is the outcome the creative is doing for that other company. So I was less connected to actual being the designer, and this is my piece of art, than rather the impact we could do from the work we do. So I immediately said, look, I want to set myself up, bringing in a team of creatives. And I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I want to have creatives that are even more creative than I am. better problem solvers than I am, but I want to stay the business person running our own company. And then sometimes when the clients have challenges and stuff like that, and they want me to be involved in overcoming that.
Another milestone that a lot of small businesses need to clear is the sales aspect of things. It's very common that the business owner is the one making sales early on. And one of the turning points is when the business owner no longer has to make sales, but brings in sales reps and executives to start making the sales on their behalf. Was that also a milestone that you needed to clear in your business?
So we're in the creative space, which means we need to really understand the client. We need to understand where the client is now, where they want to go. And is there any of our services that we will be the driving vehicle to get them from point A to point B? I probably delegated sales in the beginning a little too early in the process. And what ended up happening, who did I delegate it to? To a hungry, fresh salesperson. I found out the hard way sometimes, in the earlier part of our career, of our business, where we maybe oversold something that maybe the client didn't need that rebrand at the time. Or they could have done marketing on a way cheaper scale. And all of a sudden we had upset customers in the beginning. So finding the balance, and up until today, I think what we have for the last couple of years is working pretty good, which is we have a dedicated business development team, but they know when they need to bring me in to sign off on the proposal or sign off on the challenge the client is facing, to say, we're very comfortable undertaking that. I accomplished two things with that process. One is that if there's anything from my experience that I could feel out or see a red flag or whatever it is, I could bring it to the table. B, I introduced myself as a CEO speaking to that client. So in any time in the relationship, if the client feels that they need to bring something to my attention, they've spoken to me at least once. So they know my contact info. They were already spoken to. So I could be there. As I mentioned before, I work 80% on the business, 20% in the business. The 20% in the business would be if a client would reach out for one time, for whatever reason, I'll take that call and speak to the client. And then it's not like I'm that much detached that you can't speak to me.
That gets me to another question. You mentioned you're in a creative business, and yet you believe in systems. And one thing that I've seen a lot with creative businesses is people say, we can't systemize creativity. You can't systemize art. Clearly, you've unlocked the secret to that. So how do you reconcile creativity with systemization?
Welcome to my world.
Okay, so you're still working on that.
Exactly.
Okay.
However, you could systemize the process. You cannot systemize the creativity. I'll give you an example. If we have a template that a brand development needs to look like this, these are the steps. We now systemize the process of what elements needs to be included in that document. So we're not up to, if we hire now a new creative designer, they're not going on their own shopping spree and they're starting to say, I like to have 100 different mock-ups. We'll do a mock-up how it looks on a cup and a mock-up how it looks on a bottle. So now they're spending an extra 15, 20 hours on that process. The client doesn't need it, didn't ask for it, it's not needed, not necessary. At the same time, it is in the creative process. So if you do a system that works 60% of the time, you're a hero. People use this as an excuse and therefore they don't do any type of systems. Now 100% of the time, they're doing everything custom. Create a system deliberately that could only work 60% of the time. You'll find out that 60% of your projects have a systems and processes, and you only have to deal with the 30 to 40% that's left out, that some of it will fall into that same system, and some of it will be outside of the system, which is perfectly fine. We're not robots.
I love that, the 60% that you want to systemize. And the interesting thing that you're saying I want to call out is that you're leaving space by using a system for flexible creativity. But without that space that you're creating, that 40%, especially that 20 that's completely unpredictable, you're creating a boundary and saying, look, it's going to happen. We're going to allow that to happen. I love that approach. It's really smart.
And I'll just add, and again, something that we keep on perfecting constantly is from a business model perspective also. Like a lot of creatives are busy, what's our hourly rate? What's our break-even point? you don't realize how many hours go to waste. So we have perfected throughout the years a process that our business model has to work when we're 75% capacity. If we could not account for 25% of our hours, who knows where it went? We still need to be profitable. Because if not, we're stretching ourselves so thin that if something goes off, there goes the whole profit. You speak to entrepreneurs, you speak to business owners, and you ask them some very simple financial questions. And I'll ask them, like, who knows this information? Like, whatever, like, who knows your cash flow projection? Who knows your operating cost, whatever it is? They right away say, well, I have a bookkeeper, or I have an accountant, or I have a CFO, or I have a controller, or whatever, depending on the size of the company. And that's not a good answer. You know why? Because there's a certain set of metrics not a single business owner should be exempt of knowing in their sleep. If it's my company, I need to know how well are we forecasted, or what's our hourly rate and what's our capacity look like. You need to know that, and you'll know if your company's in the right place or not. And I think every business owner has to have a minimum of 3 metrics that they know where to get, and if they get it, they know what it means for their business.
Okay, I want to shift gears for a moment. And if you're comfortable with it, talk about your faith and your culture. Because as I've started to get to know you, and I've actually worked with a couple of Orthodox business owners, there are unique things that you navigate as a business owner. Could you share with us a few of those things that are a unique way of doing business when you practice Orthodox Judaism?
First of all, we have a lot of limitations as far as what we can or we cannot do. First of all, from a timing perspective, we're recording this in early April. We're going into the Passover holiday. We're going to be off limits for close to a week. And that means, like the week like this week, we're scrambling to do everything we need to do in order to get preparation for the holiday. And guess what? Even if you tell me, you can make $1 million, where faith comes in to say, you know what, our faith is much more than that. So I'm not going to deviate from our belief system and our faith in order to say, I'll make a quick buck here. So those are the things that go as simple as from sunset on Friday till the evening of Saturday night. We don't use any technology. 0. It's strictly family, sitting at a family. And if I want to share a book, I'm not reading it from my phone. I'm reading a physical book to my kids and stuff like that. So that's just a way of life, stuff like that are just cut out certain times of your week or your year. Then there is also a lot of strict rules about, sometimes in the business world, you could be called a savvy business owner, that you got you lured something into a business deal that maybe you shouldn't have done or something like that. That's not allowed through our culture and stuff like that. So there's a lot of strict rules as far as how we operate and how we should operate in order to live by the means and be an example that brings, when somebody deals with you, to feel, what, I appreciate actually this dealing with an Orthodox Jew. We believe that we're going to get rewarded for being able to showcase how dealing with an Orthodox Jew is in a way to actually multiply that within community or even outside of our community. And then there's a lot of nuances as far as thinking about just as simple as kosher food. When I go to an event, I just was invited to a very high-end mastermind. As soon as I got the dates, it's on a weekend. And I said, unfortunately, I cannot attend. So that was a bummer, but I'm doing it for the right reasons. Then we have something which is our belief system. And we believe very strongly that the outcome of our action is all up to God, the one above.
Thank you for sharing that, Meny. And, I come from a standpoint of I'm looking for universal principles of success, things that anyone can apply no matter what their job is and really no matter what their belief is. And I think that there's a lot of truth in having the belief that if I follow principles, if I follow the things that I believe, I'll be rewarded for it in the future. And the principle of sacrifice, too. You've talked a lot about sacrifice. To me, sacrifice is the idea of giving up something good for something better.
Exactly.
And I think that no matter what your faith is, just like the concept of the Sabbath, whenever you do that, and even if you're not doing it as a matter of religious faith, but saying, you know what, there is a day in my week I will not touch. And I'm going to protect that, to spend time with my family, to protect the things that I believe in. And I have seen time and time again that when someone practices that principle of having sacred time in their week, so to speak, that they're rewarded for that in many ways.
I'll just add one more point, which is definitely a universal, something that anybody could adapt, which is part of our culture is gratitude. We pray 3 times a day. And for me personally, every single morning, if I could start with gratitude, and I actually take my 5 minutes and think, what specifically happened the last 24 hours? And there's always something in your life that you could actually point to say, you know what? Yesterday was the first time this happened, or yesterday was the first time I got that, and so on and so forth. If you start learning with that, what ends up happening, you're a happier person. There's a quote I put out on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and actually within our community went actually viral, which is success doesn't cause happiness. Happiness causes success.
Beautiful.
If you could be yourself and you could focus on gratitude of what you're able to accomplish, you're going to become happy. If you're going to become happy, you can become unstoppable. Everything is in your reach.
I had a leader who once said that gratitude is a way of having greater abundance without getting anything new.
Beautiful.
You have everything that you still have, and yet you feel like you have more abundance simply by expressing gratitude for what you've received.
Yep.
We could talk forever, Meny. I know your time is valuable, so unfortunately I'm going to have to start wrapping things up. But I do want to ask you the question, what do you see 5 years from now? What is the future going to hold for you?
I spend a lot of time thinking of my legacy project. In terms of outside of business, I've been able to make a huge dent with my business. And I always say that as much as PTEX is, we've been around for a long time. We've been servicing hundreds of companies. We actually rebranded recently. But what I'm able to do is meet a lot of people in my network, people like you and others that have been able to grow my own network. And I'm able to make a dent. My personal mission statement, which is on my wall in my office, which is I believe every person should be given the opportunity to succeed in life. And if you have something that you could share, it's your duty and your calling to share it. And that could be a business owner that's stuck. That could be a teenager that is at the brink of thinking, where should I go, right or left? That could be an entrepreneur that's maybe they're stuck in a cubicle and they know they could do more and they just don't have the guidance. So my goal now is, how could I educate the masses in a way that I can make a huge impact? I want to educate the masses, but I want to make an impact one person at a time. But at the end of the day, you mentioned in the beginning that, about my podcast, Let's Talk Business. That's the reason why I have the podcast. It takes a lot of, that, takes a lot of effort, a lot of time and money to do a podcast. However, every time I post an episode and I'll get that one email, I don't need 2, one email. Sometimes the voices like me and you, those are the voices that people connect to, and then they take action. My job is not to solve everybody's problem. My job is everybody that reaches out, either I could solve it or I could at least give them a referral to say, go that person, you need that direction, and then make sure that person is not lost in this big World Wide Web.
Yeah, well, and you're doing that right now. You're sharing your perspective with the people who follow me. I think that's one of the reasons why we get along so well. I have another thing on my wall that's sort of my vision for every day, which is change one person's life today. Beautiful. And if I can do that with one person every day, that's 365 people a year. That's a big impact, and that's what's meaningful to me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That event that you spoke at LTB, a year and a half later, somebody sent me a picture of that notebook that we gave away at that event. And he sent me a picture. He says, if you want to hear the story, call me. I called the person. He says, I want to tell you a story. I had a business. It was growing business. And my business was failed miserably. A few weeks later, I saw an event happening in the community. I decided to go. I didn't even know why, because I don't have a business. I was sitting there and I had this black book, and every person, every speaker that spoke, it came back to me like, I'm not a failure. I could still do this. I have to just regroup, refocus, and stuff like that. Now, he said that this book now, it's a year later, we have regrouped. It's a multi-million-dollar company. Today, I could say proudly, the company is probably $40-50 million company. He said, this became like the icon in our office. Everybody knows my black book. It's what that pivotal moment that happened while I was sitting in the crowd. I was able to listen to the speakers, take notes, and say, yes, I could do it. If those people could say, believe in me, and they say I could do it if I'm focused, let me do it again. So those are moments that sometimes we as speakers and podcast hosts and so on and so forth, we sometimes don't get those stories. But those stories happen every single day. And what I want to say is, maybe people listening to this say, okay, I don't have a stage, I don't have a megaphone, I'm not speaking a podcast. You could do it in your community. You could do it to your friend, your family member. You could do it to your coworker. If you see a coworker coming to work and they're not in the best mood, they're not the same mood that they were yesterday, go over to say, something is not right. Is there anything there I could support you? And all of a sudden comes out a gushing person with the whole story. And then all of a sudden, because that person got it out, that person turned around, and all of a sudden, a year later, that person is on a totally different perspective. So nobody's exempt of being able to make the world a better place.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Meny. That's beautiful. That was fantastic. All right, so here's the point in every interview that I do where I like to summarize some actions. My perspective as a teacher, as a coach, is that it's great to learn things. It's great to be inspired, but what are you going to do? What's the action you're going to take? And I know you appreciate that because you're a man of action as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize 3 actions that I gained from your story, and then I'd like you to wrap up with 1 action of your own. And we're looking for something that someone can do today, this week, so they can make your success story a part of their success story. Sounds good?
I'm ready.
The first one from the beginning of your story was that concept of separating yourself from being a failure versus having a failure with the venture. So if you're someone listening to this and perhaps you had a recent failure, I'd invite you to think about it and reframe it as that was an experiment that didn't work. That was a hypothesis that I tested that was not accurate, but it doesn't mean that I am a failure. I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to do more in the future. And I think anyone can relate to that concept. Another one that stood out to me was the idea of considering of the work that you do, what part do you really like? Meny shared that and realized that in his business, it was the growing the business aspect of things that he enjoyed the most, and he started to focus more on that. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, you can consider the work that you do and say, what do I really like? How can I do more of that? How can I maximize my career so that I'm doing more and more of the things that I like and less of the things you don't like? Doesn't mean you can get rid of all of those things, but you can do things to minimize it. And then the last one is to ask, what's a principle that you believe in? What's one principle that you believe in that you're going to stand behind no matter what? You're not going to work on a certain day of the week. You're not going to participate in a certain type of business activity. Whatever it is, pick one principle and make a commitment to it and live that. And then maybe later on you do it with another one. And that grounding of a true principle that you count on will give you strength and give you the ability to be more successful in your career. Those are mine, Meny. What's one that you would add to this?
Beautiful. So I'll split up the one, because if you're a business owner, I would say that if you could work on your leadership, that will be something that you could start tomorrow. Now, if you're a great leader or you're just starting out as a leader, a great way of doing it is maybe you have 1 or 2 people in the team that you trust and have a meeting with them and say, I want to work on my leadership. What would be 1 or 2 things you would want to see different from me in the next 6 to 8 months or whatever it is? And then they will be honest with you. And they might say communication. They might say, focus. They might say giving compliments, whatever it is. And that becomes your to-do list, so to speak, because you got it from your team and they're there to support you with your mission. If you're a solo entrepreneur, I would say where it could focus is the focus that I mentioned before, the 4 tires. How do you make sure that you have goals for your business and you also have separate goals for your family, financial, and health? Because it's very easy to blur the line and find yourself that you put in so much effort in one of those tires, finding out that you missed out on living your real life.
Thank you so much. Great actions that someone can take. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I know there will be many people, many who have heard this and they say, man, I want to get to know him more. I want to follow him. What's the best place for them to go to continue learning from you?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Meny with an E, so it's pretty easy because there's not going to be a lot of Menys. So it's Meny is MENYHOFFMAN. So I'm pretty active there. And actually, yes, I would love to hear if you listen to this episode, drop me a DM. And our company website is PTEXgroup.com. That's PTEXgroup.com. And of course, you can listen to my podcast, which is Let's Talk Business Podcast, which is, you could find it anywhere podcasts are being found.
Yeah, immediately go there and subscribe to Let's Talk Business with Meny. Meny, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. It's wonderful to reconnect with you, my friend.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not so much about what you heard or what you felt. It's about what you do. So please do one action this week, and you'll make Meny's success story a part of your success story. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Nick Wright. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guests@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.